What's happening? What's going
What's up? What's
down?
up?
What's happening, my man? How's everything going?
Oh man, everything's going as well as could be expected. Happy Monday morning to all the good folks out here, all the remixers out there. We appreciate you and good morning to you as well, Kalonji. How you feeling?
Hey, man, listen, man. My mornings are feeling like nights these days.
You said my Monday mornings are feeling like Sunday evenings.
Man, listen, my Monday mornings are feeling like Sunday nights. We don't know what's going on. I don't know if we're ahead of time or going back. They said
You know what I'm
spring
saying?
forward, but under
It's
capitalism, we get it twisted, huh?
That's right. I was going to say, an African time is a spiraling continuum anyway. It's not linear, right?
No
So
doubt,
so maybe
no
we here and there and everywhere all at once, like that movie that just won some awards, I think, right?
Yeah, or like Big Bang Hank. We here, I'm there, I'm Big Bang Hank, and I'm everywhere. Anyway, I know I'm violating, shouting out Sugar Hill Gang early in the morning. Yeah, man, I know you had a heavy weekend, man. What's some of the things that went on? Saw you out in the streets.
Yeah, I hit the streets just briefly,
Okay, just
just
briefly made a
touchdown,
cameo.
just made a cameo. Brought my daughters out there to DC to the rally. Shout out to PSL and Answer and BAP and all the hundreds of actually organizations that were represented and all the good people out there just trying to make a little bit of noise around this whole war situation from an actual left perspective. It felt good. I'm not gonna lie. It's always good to get to meet some remixers in person. You know what I'm saying? See some folks, from out in front of these screens for a few minutes is nice. So
Are they as are
it
they
was
as
cool.
uh are they as brave as they are in person as they are in the chat, or what's the deal?
Well, I don't want to invite it,
Right.
but usually things are different when you see people in person. You know what I mean?
I
Usually things
noticed
are
that.
different. You know what I
I
mean? It's just
noticed
a
that.
little bit different.
Yeah.
And then we did do some good programming a little bit, talking about some stuff related to what we're dealing with this morning and some other things. So if anybody missed anything over the weekend, Warrior Class, Sundays,
No doubt.
whatever, just make sure you check back in and get caught up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
How about you?
definitely.
What about your weekend, my man? Yeah.
Man, my weekend, is all over the place, but I'm grateful. I did do a RSTV on Saturday,
That's right.
yeah,
Pascal
we had
Robert in the
Pascal
building.
Romeo, yeah, yeah, yeah. He was in the building, and it was cool. We had mixed reviews. Some dude posted on my page that he didn't that I did a softball interview with him. I haven't answered him yet, but I saw your joint, and I'm sorry that we disappointed you. You know what I mean? But
You know
I
what I'm
didn't know
saying?
it was
Stay tuned
softball.
and give us another shot. You know what I'm saying? You
Stick
know what I'm
around, man.
saying?
Yeah. They be dogging us, man. Like, what I'm saying? That first time somebody told me I had a softball interview, I'm like, I must have
Hey,
fell
Dr.
off.
Burroughs said I did the same thing with Norman Finkelstein. He said I
Oh,
was
bro.
easy on old boy. Like I was going, it's like, all right, man,
Hey,
all
man.
right, well,
You,
keep
you know
checking
how it
back
go,
with us.
man.
We'll try to do better next time.
Hey, man. THC is legal. Anyway, uh, speaking of things going on, 23
Yeah,
years, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly H. Rap Brown, today marks 23 years since he was um, kidnapped.
yeah.
I'm not even going to use the word capture. We want to be politically correct. Since he was kidnapped and railroaded, you know, um, like so many others before him and so many others after him, by this criminal, Stephanie B. Manis, who
Mm.
also a couple years later did the same thing to our man Kamal Siddiqui. So today we wanted to definitely not allow a day, a moment, a minute, especially a year to go by without us not acknowledging Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly H. Rap Brown. Um, he's one of our many heroes. I'm a part of his community. I bay out with Imam Jamil, and so we wanted to reach out to someone who is a comrade of his and who has not dropped the ball, uh, not one bit when it came to his case. He's been a supporter and he's been seriously out there. And I've worked with him for years, and we've all seen people come and go and go, and then some more people come and more people go and go again. But he's been here, and I appreciate his work. In fact, he's one of the reasons him and uh, his wife Iyala Ia Fulani, who is a ancestor now, but they're two of the reasons why I even stayed in Atlanta, because there was a time when I was just like, look, man, this Atlanta
It's ready
business
to
is just like
bounce.
it's for the birds. You know what I'm saying? It's not where it's at, but they were there. Um, so we're grateful for that. So before we bring this brother on, who is not only an activist and freedom fighter, a veteran Panther and citizen of the Republic of North Africa, and so much more. He's also a world-renowned artist. He was part of Gil Scott's Midnight Band. They tore things up all over the world. One of my favorite pieces that I've seen with them was an appearance on Saturday Night Live with Richard Pryor. So imagine Gil Scott Heron and the Midnight Band with Richard Pryor. I think that's what they were trying to do with Dave Chappelle and like Mos Def and Talib. But of course, that was a whole nother level. So anyway, without further ado, um, I don't know, my man Jared, you look like you're having some problems over there. Hearing, can you hear me? 1 2 1 2. Okay.
Yeah, my bad. I just had an audio glitch. I don't know
Oh,
what's
okay.
going on. I just had to. Yeah, sorry about that. So
Hey
I,
man.
I I didn't hear the last part of what you just said.
Oh, okay, okay.
My bad.
I'm gonna allow you to rewind this. Now, now I was just saying that Gil Scott Heron and the Midnight Band, appeared on Saturday Night Live with Richard Pryor, and I was just saying that, I guess that's what Saturday Night Live was trying to do with Dave Chappelle and Mos Def and Talib Kweli. Not quite the same, but shout out to them as well. But anyway,
And just quickly, I think. By the way, I think unfortunately it had to happen this way, but in tribute to Dave Trugoy, I mean Dave of De La Soul,
no doubt.
when they did the tribute to him with the Roots on Jimmy Fallon, they were trying to like recapture some of that vibe lit by vibrations, pun intended.
Right.
And it's not the same, and unfortunately it's in the context of them doing it on Jimmy Fallon, but anyway, and my bad on messing this up, but just very quickly also before we move on to our very special guest, just a heads up so folks are clear. Doctors Jones and James are off doing the people's work. They'll be back with us ASAP. So, and we will be coming back to the George Jackson discussion, so don't fret. All that's in the works, but folks is very busy,
But it
and we
is.
doing what we can do to accommodate all of our schedules. So anyway, apologize again for my audio and messing up the flow, but
It's all good, man. It
yeah.
happens. It's BPM,
Yeah.
Black Power Media. It's that Black Power. But without further ado, we're gonna we're gonna take it to one of our OGs, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, now known as Imam Jamil Al-Amin. So we're gonna hop off the screen for a second, and we'll be back at you right here, Black Power Media. Let's get it.
See, Lyndon Johnson, he can always raise an argument about law and order because he never talks about justice. But black people fall for that same argument, and they go around talking about lawbreakers. We did not make the laws in this country. We are neither morally nor legally confined to those laws. Those laws that keep them up keep us down. You got to begin to understand that. For 400 years, he taught you white nationalism, and you lapped it up. You taught it to your children. You had your children thinking that everything black was bad. Black cows don't give good milk. Black hens don't lay eggs. Black for funerals, white for weddings. That's white nationalism. Santa Claus. A white honky who slides down a black chimney and comes out white. We tend to equate progress with concessions. We can no longer make that mistake. You see, when they gave us that nigger astronaut, you say we were making progress, but I told you they were going to lose him in space. He didn't get that far. You put Adam Clayton Powell in office and you couldn't keep him. What you think they're going to do with Thurgood Marshall when they get tired of him? They gave you Walter Washington of Washington, D.C., and you said we were making progress. That's not progress. See, it's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. That's like telling me you can be a little bit pregnant.
You're muted.
Look at that. Now I'm muted. You got me back. He's like, I couldn't hear you. Now you couldn't hear me for real. That right there, that's rap. That's rap before hip hop. You know what I'm saying? And that right there is like, I mean, in 2 minutes or less, he was able to inspire and and excite the folks. Anyway, without further ado, we have a very special guest coming on board. He is the Amir of IJAN, the Imam Jamil Action Network, and we definitely want to invite him on right about now. We want to introduce our audience to someone who's no stranger to our audience, Bilal Sunni-Ali. Assalamu alaikum, what's happening, brother?
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
What's happening, about Bilal? How you feeling?
Now he's not hearing us.
Now he's having some audio problems. We might want to have you tested and might have to take you off and have you come back on. You might have to log back on. We'll see what's going on with that.
Yeah, that was why we were just talking to him.
Yeah, I mean, we was talking to him, and that right there, I mean, I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist, but it's like, man,
Yeah, we were just talking to him.
We having a full convo, everything's good, now all of a sudden, it's like we can't hear. Bob Bilal, can you hear us in the background? Okay, look like we might be having technical difficulties. But anyway.
Well, I would want to say just very quickly, we were talking about it with Dr. Burroughs, that despite the documentary on the Lowndes County movement that was just released and then going to be expanding in its release over the next few weeks, despite them discussing all of these histories relevant to the work of H. Rap Brown, including SNCC, the work in Alabama, Lowndes County in particular, obviously. And I know I believe he was not directly in Lowndes. He was in other counties in Alabama right at that time, but he succeeded Stokely Carmichael, who got a lot of attention in that documentary as the leader of SNCC. And they don't mention that, it would have, there's a lot that they, that obviously they don't deal with but it was just, to me, one more example of the erasure of Jamil Al-Amin from the history, in part because he's still currently a political prisoner. It would be easier maybe to reference him if he was already passed on or living some, bougie life at the end of his life, having moved into some, conservative centrist position politically and chilling or whatever. Then they could maybe make reference to him and be, because he would have been safe in his old age. But no, he has to be, erased altogether. And just as you said in that 2-minute clip, we see why. We get an idea of what the issues were with him running around out here, Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason I moved to Atlanta was to fight on behalf of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly H. Rap Brown. And when I moved here, I wasn't Muslim, but I got involved and got tapped in with the community and everything, and we see why he did what he did and who he is. We have Baba Bilal back, so let's see if he can hear us. Can you hear us back there, Baba Bilal? Cool. In the game. Here we go. What's happening, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing fine and doing fine. How both of you?
Man, we're live on Arrival. We was just talking about Jared was talking about the movie Lowndes County. And I don't know, have you seen that film or?
No, I haven't. The Road to Black Power.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen it yet. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard it's the bomb.
it's so I let me just encourage the both of you to see it, because just very quickly, my argument is that it is another example of how increasingly the propaganda is getting more sophisticated. It's very well done, but there are some clear things that I think both of you will be able to identify that as problems with it that I think we have to increasingly work harder to fill in those gaps. But anyway, so I do encourage you to check it out. But yeah, anyway.
Notice when I saw several trailers on it, but I didn't see any mention of H. Rap Brown, and no mention of H. Rap Brown in a film about Lowndes County. I figured it might be a very good film, but it would have to lack accuracy, because H. Rap Brown was the state chairman of SNCC for Alabama, and so all of the projects there he was involved in, but he was directly involved in the project in Whitehall. And he was living in Whitehall during that time of the voters registration period and self-defense period.
Not a mention, not even in passing, not even in the background of the background of the background do you see reference to rap. But it's slick. It's very slick. You'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I'm just very quickly, Kalonji, I just want to commend you for putting this together. And Brother Bilal, thank you for coming through. It's an honor to get to build with you, rap with you, pun intended, on this particular subject. Because especially coming fresh off of watching that documentary, this is very much the work needing to be done to pay tribute and try to work to get this man out. Anyway.
Yeah. Listen, this is why it's important for us to have platforms like this, because you can actually set the record straight. So you can go watch whatever is being produced and introduced, and then you can get it from the horse's mouth. Bob Bilal, as Dr. Jared Ball said, it's an honor to have you on. I've been knowing you for about 2 decades right now. I think none of these was in my chin when we got started. I'll blame it on Jared, but definitely, for folks who are new on the block and aren't familiar with Imam Jamil Al-Amin or H. Rap Brown, can you give us a historical, put it in context as to who he is, how he got involved in our people's liberation movement, and why he's important, not just then but now?
Okay, well, first let me begin, as he often begins, by seeking refuge in the law against misleading and being misled. And I seek refuge in the law against betrayal, being betrayed into ignorance by others. And I ask the Lord to guide my heart and guide my tongue, and pray that the things I will be able to discuss tonight, this morning, will be of great significance, and will be of benefit to those who are listening to it. We can start tracing the history of H. Rap Brown as an activist when he was about 15 years old. His brother, many of you may know about his brother Ed Brown, who was an activist, and it was his big brother, his older brother, who was a leader to many of us. But to him first, he was following Ed Brown around, and that's how he got into politics, and got into, when I say got into politics, I mean got into political struggle. That's the politics I'm referred to when I say into politics. He got into political struggle, doing things along with his brother. They in Baton Rouge, where they grew up, they were involved in desegregating parks, lunch counters, things of that nature. He led high school walkout, a blackout, a walkout of high school in support of a walkout that had taken place on Southern University's campus, where his brother was going at the time. His brother got put out of school and went up to Washington, D.C. went to Howard University. Rap didn't go to Howard, but he went to Washington, D.C. anyway. And he got involved in NAG, which was a satellite organization of SNCC. NAG stood for the Nonviolent Action Group, and he was one of the leadership in the Nonviolent Action Group. And he went from being a leader in the Nonviolent Action Group to going back down south when Ed went back down south. Rap went back down south also and got involved. He was then in the full body of SNCC, and he went to Greene County and Lowndes County, where he was involved in voter registration. And voter registration at that time was, it wasn't just a matter of knocking on doors and telling people, hey, you need to vote. Voter registration was explaining to people the need to take over the offices that run the life of our community. And so it wasn't a matter of voting. He wasn't teaching people how to vote so that they could make careers in electoral politics. He was teaching people how to vote and how to register for the vote and how to run the office. That was SNCC's program, to teach people how to use the vote in our struggle for self-determination and for community self-determination. I've heard that term self-determination be used. Unfortunately, people think it's about your personal self, but it's for the self-determination to determine which way a community will go, and for the community to govern itself. And that's why SNCC was involved in voter registration as a form of self-determination. And that's where we get the term Black Power, to be in power and take over the seats of government, take over the social apparatuses that govern your country, the education, everything that govern your community, that you use it. Because if you don't use it, it'll be used as a weapon against you. He was involved in that heavily, and he was involved in like I said, Greene County and Lowndes County. And he was involved in Lowndes County at a time when teaching people to vote and working with people around the vote was a life and death situation. They had registered the people to vote, and just like many other places, many of our people were sharecroppers, and when being sharecroppers, they were able to be evicted, and that meant no place to live and no work. So people in Lowndes County who owned land and owned quite a bit of land. As a matter of fact, they gave SNCC a house. The house is still there. It's called the SNCC House, and it's still there in Lowndes County, and still being used for the purpose of educating people and teaching people their rights. But the point that he was, when they the point I was bringing out now is that when people were kicked off their land, kicked off where it had no place to live, they were invited to live in a place that was erected on land that some of the African people in Lowndes County owned, and it was a tent city, and that tent city was actually on Black-owned land. The Klan would come by often and shoot into the tents. And so Rap Brown at that time, along with Stokely Carmichael was in and out of Lowndes County as well, and another person, um, uh, um, can't think of his name, Wendell Paris, who I believe is in the film, and that's in that film, Black Power, Lowndes County, The Road to Black Power. Wendell Paris was one of the persons, along with Rap Brown, who were responsible for developing self-defense teams. Had they not developed self-defense teams, the Klan would have continued to wreak havoc in the Black Belt. But that's where a lot of it stopped, because they were able to develop self-defense teams. Those self-defense teams helped quell the violence of the wild vigilantes in the Black Belt South. So that was his background, and that was his direct touch with the violence that he had spoke of, and he's often known, well known, and often quoted as saying that America is that violence is as American as cherry pie. But that violence as American as cherry pie comes from his experience with Americans being violent against African people, just trying to obtain their basic rights, like the right to vote, just trying to attain that right to vote. And as we said, that right to vote, that working on that right to vote was so that there would be Black people who are interested in the direction the community would grow. So it was not about just having the vote and the vote make you free. If you use the vote correctly, it'll help you toward your liberation. But the vote in and of itself, as we know and as we see around the country, a lot of people are wasting their vote because they're not using it to empower their community. They might view it to empower or to put a person in office who claims that they're interested in empowering the community. But when you have a group, when you have a community group, pick a group of people and put them on the ballot, that's using the vote collectively and successfully in a collective manner toward Black power, toward true self-determination of that community.
Can I just ask real quick?
Right.
Sorry, Kalonji. I just want to confirm real quick what that Brown H-Rap at the time was directly involved with that tent city defense in Lowndes County, because that does come up in the documentary. And again, he's not mentioned at all. And I don't think the brother that you mentioned was mentioned either.
I saw Wendell in the.
Okay, I may be wrong on that. Okay,
I did see Wendell in the trailer, and I was wondering how much of a role Wendell had in the film.
They talk about Tent City, and they talk about that violence, and they talk about that there were self-defense developed in response, but they don't mention
3 people. Yeah, people responsible for developing that self-defense and for carrying out that self-defense. That was Stokely Carmichael, H-Rap Brown, and Wendell Paris.
Right on. So let me ask you this, because I know that you've been talking about the vote and Jared's mentioning, the film itself around Lowndes County. For folks who aren't familiar, because you're not talking about, Democrat, Republican, you were talking about a party that was created, the Lowndes County Freedom Party. Can you talk a little bit about that formation, what it stood for, and who were some of the other players in regards to that, and also its connection to the Black Panther Party?
The Lowndes County Freedom Organization was what they was. It was part of the continuation of the move, because they had all been involved with Fannie Lou Hamer in Sunflower County, Mississippi. It was all part of that determination after the we could call it a sellout or you could call it a compromise that took place when Fannie Lou Hamer led a delegation to the National Democratic Party. They were seated, but they weren't given any voting power. So, and they made up the majority of the people who were registered Democrats in Mississippi, and they weren't given any voting power in deference to the white rooster. That was the symbol. But the white Democratic Party, which was for whites only in Mississippi and Alabama, that's what a lot of people left that convention with, the idea that we shouldn't be a part of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but we needed to have our own parties. So they developed freedom organizations in various counties. And that freedom organization, Lowndes County Freedom Organization, used the Black Panther as a symbol. And they had the ballot was actually, you had the Black Panther on the actual voting ticket. So people were told to vote for the Black Panther, meaning vote the Black Panther ticket, vote the Black Panther slot, vote that group of people who had been organized by the community and selected by the community to run for office so that the community could govern itself. That was the Black Panther ticket. Bobby Seale wrote to the brothers and sisters in Lowndes County, asking them could he use that symbol and use that for the development of the organization that he and Huey Newton were developing at the time. And of course they agreed. They said, go ahead and use it, because that's what they were trying to do, to proliferate that concept of voting, as we teach people to vote so that they can vote to control their community. And so that was the direct connection to the Black Panther Party that became a national organization. There were other groups like SNCC. SNCC was developing freedom organizations, but there was another group called RAM, which was operating in the North, which was actually developing Black Panther parties. And so there was this direct connection, because SNCC was working with RAM, and so that was how the Black Panther Party as a national organization grew, because there were already freedom organizations being developed in the South that were using the Black Panther ticket and the Black Panther symbol. And there was RAM in the North developing Black Panther parties, just the same as the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. So they began calling the Lowndes County Freedom Organization the Black Panther Party.
So real quick, because I know you mentioned RAM, and when you're talking about the Black Panther parties that RAM were that they were developing, this would be under Muhammad Ahmed, as far as Max Stanford. Is that correct? Or
yeah, Max Stanford, also known as Dr. Muhammad Ahmed, was one of the people, and they were one of the people in leadership in RAM that was helping to develop those parties. He himself had worked to develop the Black Panther Party in New York, in Harlem specifically, and in Philadelphia. And there was several other places, I believe Cleveland, Ohio, where RAMS, RAM stood for the Revolutionary Action Movement. And that's the organization. That's the organization I'm talking about when I say RAM.
no doubt. And we have had the opportunity to interview Muhammad Ahmed, formerly Max Stanford, on this platform as well. So if you all have missed that, make sure you go to RSTV, Riot Starter TV, and check out one of the throwbacks we did, which is definitely a powerful interview as well, because he's another brother who's often overlooked when it comes to this movement work.
We
Yeah,
may overlook him. We may overlook him or underlook him up, but the state never underlooks him or underestimated him. As a matter of fact, he was on the cover. I remember back in the day, he was on the cover of Life magazine with the title "The Most Dangerous Man in America."
wow.
They were highlighting him because they knew that he represented this group, the Revolutionary Action Movement, who was definitely for revolutionary action.
Now, if you don't mind, because I know we talking about Imam Jamil, we're gonna definitely get back to him. But since we're on the topic of since we mentioned Max Stanford as well, if you could, for for our viewers and listeners, we had the opportunity, like I said, to interview him in this on that particular platform, but also he's in our film Organizing is the New Cool. But I would like you, someone who was and is a comrade. I've heard stories from Fulani about him getting out, so on and so forth. But for our viewers, can you give us an idea of who Max Stanford was and is, if you don't mind?
Max Stanford was a very important person in the development of the struggle of the revolutionary nationalist ideology. He was one of the people that put forward the the purposefulness of studying Marxist, Leninist, and Maoist thought without calling yourself a Maoist or a Marxist, Leninist, or but to use those instruments and use the works that they have developed, in furthering our struggle, and he was very instrumental in the Black Power during the times when we had major rebellions, major community rebellions. We had a forum that would meet where people would meet, Black revolutionaries would meet, and they were known as the Black Power Conferences. There were a series of Black Power Conferences. The conference that founded the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa in Detroit in 1968 was one of those Black Power Conferences. There was another Black Power Conference in 1968 that was in Philadelphia. In July, I think, of 1968, that founded the African People's Party. And the African People's Party was a party that called for self-determination, that called for the same national territory as the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa formed. But they didn't form a provisional government. Some of them functioned with the provisional government, but they sought to develop a party. And that at that period in history, we're talking about the development of the African People's Party was going right around the time of the demise of the Black Panther Party. I'm saying the demise because the Black Panther Party was under attack. So as the Black Panther Party was under attack by the state, we remember there were attacks on headquarters in different parts of the country, and so the African People's Party was a party that sprung up at that time with the similar structures, cell structure and sections had section structure, and geographically within a city had different sections of that city, and they organized along the same basis of community service and self-defense.
Right on, right on. I wanna ask you too, because we know that eventually um, H. Rap Brown became chairman of SNCC. Uh, he was honorary minister of justice for the Black Panther Party, um, which was I think that clip we showed was, I believe he's on the house arrest at that particular point when he
Mm.
spoke out at the rally to free Huey. I wanted to ask you because folks, with the aid of the state, when a lot of people hear SNCC and they hear the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, most folks don't have any idea about some of the folks who came up out of SNCC, who were, became members of the party and Black Panther Party and other formations. I want to ask you, you know, in if you could briefly tell us what SNCC actually was, what they represented, and how did H. Rap Brown or Imam Jamil Al-Amin become chairman of SNCC?
But SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was it was the youth wing of the movement. The most popular expressions of our movement for freedom in the South were SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and also Core Congress of Racial Equality, and the NAACP, of course. SNCC was a group. It was a group of young people that was organizing, and they were in touch with each other, and they were being tutored somewhat by well, my mind just stuck. I was about to call on her name. She's one of the people that we had in the Freedom Fighters Film Festival. We had Fannie Lou Hamer and this other the sister that I'm talking about. Maybe you could recall her name, but she met with them and she advised them not to be a wing of SNCC, or not to be a wing of SCLC.
Oh, Ella Baker.
Huh?
Ella Baker, right?
Right. Ella Baker is who I'm talking about. Ella Baker advised them that they should form their own organization and not be a youth wing of the NAACP or a youth wing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So they formed their own organization, which basically became a youth organization. SNCC enjoyed allegiance from not only college students, but college student age people who were organizing in our struggle. So SNCC became like the conduit for a lot of youth organizations to get into the movement. It's so many people. We could take a show just to talk about the people who've come out of SNCC, and the work that they are continuing to do. But that's how SNCC developed. When SNCC moved to the point of where self-defense was a clear part of their platform, a clear part of their platform of action, they moved to change their name, and they did change their name officially for a while, and they kept the same initials, and they became known as the Student National Coordinating Committee, and they dropped the nonviolence. But although they changed their name for a period of time, they went back and reassumed the original name, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for identification purposes, so it would be clear who that Student National Coordinating Committee was not a new organization. It was just another form of the same organization. But that made it clear to a lot of people that their philosophy of nonviolence was that nonviolence should be used as a tactic in our struggle whenever it fit, but nonviolent was not a way of life or a tactic to be used at all times.
So so I know Kalonji had his own direction he wanted to go in, but so when he comes back, we'll happily let him reset. But if we could, for those of us who are trying to catch up on some of the gaps of the history related to H. Rap Brown, Jamil Al-Amin, how do we go from H. Rap Brown to Jamil Al-Amin, and then how do we go from H. Rap Brown as a relatively free man to still existing to this day as a political prisoner? So if we could just start with that first part, how does he go from being H. Rap Brown to Jamil Al-Amin?
Well, I mentioned how how he would make comments concerning violence, the violence in America, and that was part of the organizing platform that he would speak on self-determination as he traveled around as the chairman of SNCC. He had become a well sought out spokesperson because he could explain things. He had that ability to explain things in a short amount of time so that people could understand. You could understand concepts that he would explain. And he was at a rally in Cambridge, Maryland, in Cambridge, Maryland, where he was shot at that rally. He was shot in the head by Black policemen. The rally was over, and people said he incited a riot, but the riot actually started when the people heard the gunfire and heard that he had been shot. So what incited the riot was the policeman shooting H. Rap Brown at this rally, at this community self-determination rally in Cambridge, Maryland. The FBI in the state of Maryland had developed a plot where they charged him with inciting a riot and inciting a riot and inciting arson. And they so when he left the scene of the
and I'm sorry, he did that by what? By getting shot in the head? That's how he was doing it?
Yeah.
That's how he was inciting the riot?
Yeah, he told them a school burnt down. It was a school burnt down. The school had burnt down at least twice before he even ever came to Cambridge, Maryland. But the school burnt down, and they blamed that on him. Even though it's like, this school was a target. The community. One of the things that I remember Rap used to say, if the people thought that I was talking foolishness, they would run me out of town. They wouldn't start burning the town down. But that's what happened, and that was a clear example. If I'm talking something that you think is nonsense, you're not going to pay me no mind. But the fact that they were paying him his mind, and they did respond, because one of the things he said is that if America doesn't come around, we'll have to burn it down. If America doesn't come around, we'll have to burn it down. America still had a choice in that. All they had to do was come around. It's just like when Malcolm X, Al-Haj Malik Shabazz says it's either the ballot or the bullet. It's the ballot or the bullet, but it's not up to us whether it's the ballot or the bullet. It's up to you whether it's the bullet. So if America doesn't come around, we have to burn it down. Cities were burning. Like I mentioned, there was the Black Power Conference, which rap was part of those delegations that would come from the South in the Black Power Conference. But at this particular rally in Cambridge, Maryland, the FBI and the state of Maryland, the state of Virginia, they all got together and devised this plot, because when Rat Brown left the site, he had to cross, he had to cross the state boundary line into the District of Columbia, which is a federal district. And then he had to cross the state boundary line out of the federal district into Virginia. So they charged him with inciting a riot and crossing state lines, interstate travel to avoid persecution. They never told him that he was being indicted for starting a riot. Of course, he left the scene because he's shot. He has to go get. He's not just going to lay around bleeding. He had to go get fixed up, and then he was planning to go home to Baton Rouge. So when he crosses these state lines and crosses the federal district, and then goes into Virginia, because the airport, in order to fly out of DC, you got to go to Virginia. And so the airport is in Virginia, and that's when they bust him there, and they charged him with these two different state crimes, and the feds charge him with interstate flight to avoid persecution. So that's how they got the ball rolling of projecting his name and using and saying that he was preaching violence, and they had him on multiple charges, which later you can look up the district attorney in the county where Cambridge, Maryland was, said that, when they dropped the charges, when they finally had the hearing, when the charges were dropped, the district attorney said that, he made that up, about the whole thing about inciting to riot. He made that up so that the feds could develop a track of tracking him. And then, so as he's going to court on that issue, we believe they tried to assassinate him. And the car that he was known to ride in blew up. They came with a story that he was bringing a bomb to the courthouse and that he was going to blow up the courthouse. So it gets more and more ridiculous the more you get the things they charge him with, and the things they said that he was going to do. But this led him to another point of him being a spokesman for the youth, was that in the North, in particularly, we were hot on the drug traffic. And so they began this movement called the H. Brett Brown Anti-Dope Brigades. And there was a meeting at a place that they said he was coming to rob. But if you check, and I really encourage people to read court cases, because if you check that case where H. Rap Brown is charged with robbery of this place where it was said it was a known place for where drug traffickers hung out. They, in the evidence submitted, is a wallet which belonged to H. Rap Brown, and wallets that belonged to two of his co-defendants. So this just as an example why I say it's important to study the cases, because in the case itself, the case itself, the state will incriminate itself if you read the lines. You don't even have to read between the lines. If you just have the patience to read the lines of what the state has recorded, it will show you how the state is in a conspiracy to violate all of our rights.
So wait, you are you saying that, okay, because because you said it nonchalant, but are you saying that they accuse them of robbing places, and I guess they robbed each other as well because the evidence were their own wallets?
Yeah, that's how convoluted the evidence was.
What he steal? He stole his wallet with his ID in it. I mean, how did it?
But anyway, this was what we were doing. I wasn't at that gathering, so I can't say what happened. But what we were involved in, what the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was involved in at that time, was meeting with people that was involved in drug traffic and convincing them that that they should be on our side. They need to stop the trafficking in drugs, because that was disrupting our movement for self-determination, and it was making them see that. And a lot of times when we would meet with them, the police would be there, because the police are some of them are always involved, as we knew in the North, as we knew in the Bronx and in Harlem. The police were explicitly involved in the drug traffic. So one of the arguments we had with California, and this is not to say this was a East Coast West Coast beef, but it was a part of understanding that on the East Coast we were about stopping drug traffic. And the argument, they said that we would be taking the party too far, because that would be going against the mafia. And he said, yeah, it would be going against the mafia and the police, which we've already declared to be going against the police and setting up defense against police brutality. So this is the former evidence of police brutality, the fact that the police are trafficking drugs. But getting back to Imam Jamil, he was shot again at that point, shot in the stomach, and he went to prison. He did time up in Attica, but before he went to the state prison, he was at Rikers Island, and there was a group where we still use the same name, Darul Islam movement. The Darul Islam movement would come into Rikers Island, and they would have the Friday Juma prayer service in Rikers Island, and they would recruit people that wanted to accept Islam. And Rap went to several of those meetings and then one of the times when they began to recruit, he stepped up and said that he wanted to become a Muslim and learn more about it. So he took his Shahada, his declaration of faith, and he accepted Islam as his way of life. And at a soon later point, he changed his name to Jamil Al-Amin. When he got out of prison, he came south, where his wife had got a teaching job in Atlanta. So he came south to Atlanta and got with some brothers who who formed the masjid and as an organization, and they found a place. It was a place in the neighborhood that they bought, and that became the mosque. It's still the mosque at 547 West End Place. If you're ever in that part of town, 547 West End Place, community mosque, and that became the mosque that Imam Jamil was the imam over, and that became the community that he was the imam of that community. And there were a number of communities that were part of that formation that I mentioned, the Darul Islam, and all of those communities, whether they remained in the Darul Islam or not, they formed up with a similar program where we had one of the things that was prevalent at all of the mosques was that there was an area of integrity where no dope traffic, no dope use, and when you cut out that heroin trafficking, you cut out a lot of other crimes that go with it. So it's a way to clean up the neighborhood, and so that's what was established for a certain radius, half a mile radius of the masjid, and in Atlanta, community masjid, there was no dope selling allowed, no dope using allowed.
I want to definitely touch on that because again, when folks, they get this assumption when individuals decide to align themselves spiritually, that some folks mistake that as them getting soft, right? I took my shahada at 547 West End Place, and Baba Bilal was one of the brothers that was there that when I took my shahada. I got to admit, prior to that and prior to coming here working on behalf of Imam Jamil, I didn't. I was one of those brothers that got it confused. When you said, I was a fan of H. Rap Brown, so I didn't, just like I was a fan of El Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, and oftentimes when you're not clear, you'll be like, man, I like these cats, but why would they get down with this or why would they get down with that? I was also a part of the Sutra team, which is the 24-hour security team in the West End. I would like for you, if possible, to go a little bit further, because you mentioned cleaning up the community, and that was one of the most important aspects of Imam Jamil, him moving to Atlanta, cleaning up the West End in particular. I know that there was a number of folks who came to him and who would visit him and to a great extent sought his nod of approval to have family members and such move into that community. If you don't mind, talk about how some of the things that was done when you talk about cleaning up that West End community, because we know that it had a history of nonsense going on. Let's say that prior to that. So can you touch on that?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of nonsense. First of all, the park, which is right adjacent to our masjid, was it was like a den for drug trafficking. You could get anything. Matter of fact, they used to call it Little Amsterdam. A lot of people who not world travelers, they may not know about Amsterdam, but Amsterdam for a long time was a place when you traveled to Europe or the Nordic states, you could go to Amsterdam and get like now they have it as marijuana is being decriminalized and legalized. They have parlors where you could go to. That had been the case in Amsterdam, for ages, for long. And so they used to refer to the park in the West End, where our masjid is, where our community was developing, as Little Amsterdam. So it was a curfew. the city has a curfew on the park, but the community put a curfew on the park, and as well as a restriction of no dope trafficking at any time, and at nighttime especially, there would be security, and security would be to watch over the homes and the businesses of the of the Muslims who were developing that community. It was important because people who were involved in the drug traffickers would make threats, and to make sure that they didn't carry out those threats, the sutra or the watch was established. So it was, and because that security team was established within the community became known for being safe. It went from being a place a place where you could get any kind of drug, or you could do any kind of foolishness, to a place where you don't do no kind of foolishness like that. As a matter of fact, you would be safe. As a matter of fact, former Mayor Andrew Young, former Ambassador Young, tells the story of when his niece was enrolled at Spelman College. He came to the neighborhood walking around, talking to people, letting them know that his niece would be at Spelman College, and that he wanted to know that there was places, he was identifying places where she could go to be safe. And the people told him, quite frankly, oh, you ain't got to worry about that, because the West End ain't what it used to be. They said, as a matter of fact, your friend is here. Your friend, H. Rap Brown, is here. He's the minister over at the mosque over there at that house right there in the middle of the block. And things are very safe. Matter of fact, you should go talk to your friend about how the community is. And that's how former Mayor Young got to know that his former SNCC colleague and comrade was functioning in Atlanta, and was operating a zone of safety which extended to Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark College, AU, and the whole college conglomerate of campuses that were adjacent to the neighborhood where the masjid was established.
Did he go see him?
Yes, yeah, he did go see him, and renewed that friendship.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
right on.
As a matter of fact, he renewed that friendship to the point where he was part of the trial. He was a big part of the trial, because after Imam Jamil was convicted, they had a second part of the trial to determine the sentencing, and he was in the sentencing part of the trial, urging that Imam Jamil do not be given the death penalty, but that his life should definitely be spared, because he had done so much in the community to save lives and to spare lives. So Andrew Young was a very big part of that trial. And when the Conviction Integrity Unit, which we'll talk about a little later, was established, at the Conviction Integrity Unit's inaugural meeting, he was at that inaugural meeting, and he talked to the Conviction Integrity Unit, telling them that he was glad to see the development of this form of redress to grievances against the court, and a way to resolve wrongful convictions, and that one of the first cases he suggested they look at would be the case as, and in his words, the case of his friend H. Rap Brown.
Hey, all right. I got to give him credit on that. No question.
I'll look at that case right now. So that's pretty much, you know, without getting into the details, what the straightening up of the dope traffic, and that and how that definitely lessened the crime of, you know, of break-ins, crap games. I remember one of the times in not right there in the West End, but in another area where I was, and we were doing the same thing. They had a crap game. I mean, shooting craps at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, there were people of all ages coming into the community. I mean, and strapped heavily, because there was a lot of money down there on the ground. And so people was there. Some people were there to defend their money that was on the ground, and some people was there to see if they could get that money. So there was people. So people were strapped, and people was extra strapped to watch out for the people who were strapped that was coming for that disruption. And we was moving against all of it. We saying this level of potential violence can't be in the community. You got grandmothers who couldn't even come on the street because they scared to come on the street. They see what's out there. People don't even go to work because they ain't coming out their house to catch the bus, to go to MARTA or nothing because of that. So that was prevalent. It was moving around Atlanta and everywhere, you know. So we were. That was an extension. The area where I lived on Avon Avenue, that was an extension of the community, of the zone of integrity that we had established that started from 547 West End Place. This is part of cleaning up of the community. It was not just to stop the dope traffic, but stop all related traffic related to the dope traffic being there.
And I appreciate you saying this one key part, the community cleanup, because now when folks talk about community cleanup, it's just you get a couple garbage cans and some gloves and you take some pictures and some videos and you say that, well, this is what mutual aid looks like. No, that's not community cleanup. That right there is you know, that's like the cafeteria lady. You just cleaning the lunchroom. That's the surface, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that particular part, because that's the part that you know, we like to gloss over. You know, revolution is real, as you know, revolution is real sexy these days. It ain't the same no more. So
Right. People,
you know,
we do community cleanup, and that's all they'll mean. They'll clean up the trash, the visible trash that's in the street. They'll go get plastic bags and clean up.
It's like
Go along.
Yeah, definitely the photo op. It reminds me of, like, you know, you tell your children to go clean a room, and you know, you're like, damn, they cleaned it up quick. And then you look under the bed, everything's everything's under the bed, under the rug. That's what they do with this whole community cleanup. I wanna I wanted to for folks who are not familiar with the case, because we've painted this picture, and as we mentioned earlier, today marks the 23rd year since his capture. I want to take it to the night of March 16th, when all of this began, and there's these outrageous claims, so on and so forth, and you know what led to it. Because just listening, you know, playing crackers advocate, we're sitting here and we're checking this out, and it seems like, man, this must have been a good brother. He's been out there working on behalf of the people. You talking about he cleaned up the dope den, Little Amsterdam. You know, he cleaned up Little Atlantic City out there.
Even had Andy Young.
Even Andy Young.
How could you get any better than that?
Man, they had Ice Cube coming through. We had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whoever's coming through. You know what I'm saying? They checking in with Imam Jamil, with H. Rap Brown. What
Mhm.
happened? You know what's the situation? Let's talk about that.
Well, as I mentioned, the the dope traffic is pretty much trafficked by the police departments. Yeah, Atlanta is no different. Just like New York City Police Department, Atlantic City Police Department, Jersey City Police Department, Philadelphia Police Department. These are all dope traffickers.
Hmm.
They traffic big in heroin back in those days, and they're trafficking in the whatever's the popular drug of the day. The police are the ones who are handling it, you know. And so when you do community cleanup, and you're not just holding a plastic bag, throwing trash in the street and shaking hands with the police, the dope dealers, you're going against the dope dealers. You're going against the police department. So the police is against you. And then we got this thing that's that people know as gentrification. We, as part of the community cleanup, we would also invite brothers to invest in the community, and so we'd have Muslims, members of our masjid, who would buy the homes in the community, buy the property in the community, and re-rent them out to Muslims who were coming in, or re-rent them out to whoever needed them, because generally we would do a better job in maintaining the property um, than the previous landlords would. This the program of gentrification, which is a program that's run out of the Pentagon. It's not run out of HUD. This is the Pentagon program. This is the war program, not to allow for property to be owned and businesses to be established with the same families for over 3 generations. That's been the program of the Pentagon. That's been the program of it's called the Department of Defense. It was called the War Department then, and that's the program they used to come up with the Trail of Tears, to march the indigenous people out of our national territory and send them to Florida, send them to mainly to Oklahoma, and to kill them along the way. This is the program of not allowing people to settle or develop wealth. And that program, it's considered racist and discriminatory. But I'm trying to point out to you and to everyone willing to listen that this is not just racially discriminating against us buying property in our own neighborhood. This is a program of war against us, allowing us to develop neighborhoods, develop property where children grow up in an area and their children grow up in an area. And naturally, you got a few generations you've been in that area, then you feel, well, this is your turf, and you're willing to fight for it. So to erase that ability to develop an area that we are willing to fight for, this is a program that they have enacted. And nowadays they call it gentrification, and people feel it's racial discrimination, but it's much more than racial discrimination. So to have a program where you clean up the community and then you buy the property in the community is a program that's fighting genocide, that's fighting back this ability for the War Department, the Department of Defense, to decide how our neighborhoods develop. So this becomes something that the Department of Defense is interested in disrupting. This program that's disrupting their program. Because this program is not just a program in Atlanta. Imam Jamil was the imam, but he was the emir of over 40 communities, over 40 similar communities around the country, and in the Caribbean, and in Europe, and in parts of Africa. So this is a major development that that was developing, that the United States was clearly against. And at the time, another thing that we didn't get into is rap or Imam Jamil as coach. A lot of young boys know him as coach because he's an excellent basketball player, excellent ran track, played football, and he was coach the local teams in the West End area, plus other areas of Atlanta. And he was very important to understand that he was coaching teams in Whitehall, Alabama, in Lowndes County, where he had, as a young man, worked in self-defense. The municipality of Whitehall invited him to bring his community and establish an Islamic community in Whitehall. We have two major holidays in the year. They're called Eids, celebrations. One is the celebration that we have at the end of Ramadan. Ramadan is coming up soon. But another is the celebration that we have during the Hajj season. During the Hajj season, there's a celebration of after the sacrifice that's based on, a lot of people are familiar with the story of Abraham having a vision that he was slaughtering his son on the altar. And so he told his son about the vision, and his son Ishmael says, yeah, well, let's do it. That's what the law say do. I'm down with it. And when he gets in the position, the same position he's in that he saw himself in the vision, in the dream, then he's told to halt. An angel comes and tells him to halt. He fulfilled the dream because he didn't slaughter his son in the dream. He was about to slaughter his son in the dream. So when he's about to slaughter his son in the dream, that's when there's divine intervention, and they point to him a ram, and they tell him to slaughter the ram instead. And so this is the celebration that takes place in the pilgrimage known as the Hajj. So on that day, it's known as Eid al-Adha, the Feast of the Sacrifice. So the Feast of the Sacrifice that year was scheduled in the year 2000, was scheduled on the Roman calendar for March 17th, which was the morning after the shooting took place. March 16th, everyone was expecting Imam Jamil to be in Whitehall.
And I'm sorry, can we just get the year just to clarify?
March 16th, the year 2000, 23 years ago. We were expecting Imam Jamil to be in Whitehall, which is where he was taken into custody, where he was apprehended. It's so much more of the story of how the feds were in Alabama, and they were staging it, doing shooting at each other and staging it, and they were prepared to come to court to say that Imam Jamil was shooting at them, and one even said the bullet whizzed right by his head. But when they realized that the people in the community was watching them do all this, they decided that they wouldn't take that case to court. They would take the case to court that Imam Jamil had shot the sheriff deputies on the 16th, because on the 17th there was a confession by a man who goes by several names: Silas Muhammad, Otis Jack.
Allow. Before you go there, not to cut you off, but there are folks who don't even know what happened on the 16th. So,
Okay,
in
on
regards to the warrant, all that, yeah.
on the 16th, there was a shooting. There was a shooting incident, and one sheriff deputy, Ricky Kinchin, lost his life, and another sheriff deputy, Algernon English, lost his mind. I said because he began saying things. I say he lost his mind because he said the mayor came to the hospital to congratulate him, on being for trying to take down H. Rap Brown, and the hospital official said there was no record of such thing happening. So obviously he had lost his mind or he was hallucinating. But he was not in his right state of mind. Obviously, if we examine the evidence, and that's part of the evidence, that he was making these statements at the same time that they claimed he was making the statements that Imam Jamil was the person that shot him. So there was these two sheriff deputies, and we need to go back further because sheriff deputies were sent to issue a warrant for Imam Jamil because prior to that, in January of 2000, Imam Jamil was stopped in Cobb County. And when he was stopped in Cobb County for a traffic violation, and they questioned him about the tags on his car. They said they were tracking down a car theft ring, and he had plates on his car showing that he had just bought the car from a dealer, but they never went and shut that dealership down. But they came up with all this other activity against Imam Jamil. During that stop, they saw a badge, which was a badge that was given to him by the mayor of Whitehall, because, as I explained before, he was involved in doing work with youth in Whitehall, Alabama, around athletics. So the mayor had given him a badge as part of the auxiliary police, not the police department, but the auxiliary police, which does work such as Imam Jamil was doing. And so they so this was the case that he had in court. When he went to court, the day that he was in court, and you can check this, it was a snowstorm. That's not an everyday occurrence in Atlanta, Georgia, a snowstorm. But
Right.
there was a snowstorm on that day. I believe the date was January 20th, 2000. And he went, the court was closed because of the snowstorm. Later on that afternoon, as we know how the weather goes, you could have a bright sunny day, even though it was snowing that morning. The judge opened the court, called the name Imam Jamil, and put out a bench warrant for him. So that was the that was the flimsy excuse for the bench warrant. So then he comes, these two brothers, Ricky Kinchin and Algernon English, working for the sheriff's department, to issue a warrant because he didn't appear in court. He didn't appear in court on this snowy day. So here they come at night. It was after 8 o'clock at night when they come to issue this warrant. There was another man, and that's what I was just describing. He has several names that he goes by. One is Silas Muhammad, another is Otis Jackson, another is James Santos. James Santos said he was looking for Imam Jamil because he was part of the Vice Lords, a street organization out of Chicago, and he wanted to pledge Vice Lords being an assistant to us on the security teams. He wanted to pledge Vice Lords because the Vice Lords were interested in no longer being a crime organization, but becoming a community organization, which they have done since that time. They have done, and we've had meetings, public meetings in Atlanta with leadership of the Vice Lords from Chicago, declaring themselves to be a community organization and to rid themselves of the criminal element that they had been known for. But this person, James Santos, had come to initiate that on the street level years before. And when he knocked on he went and knocked on the door of the store that Imam Jamil had previously run a store on the corner. And he didn't get any answer. He went around to the back of the store. And according to his affidavit, when he said he was leaving the back of the store, these two sheriff deputies appeared and told him to show his hands. And before he could show his hands, they opened fire on him. So he said he was strapped, so he fired back, and he killed one, and he killed one, and he wounded the other one, and then he said he would have finished both of them off, but he was mainly interested in getting out of there after all the noise of the gunfire. So the next morning, his parole officer called him and asked him why did his bracelet show didn't have any report for a certain activity. So he told him what he was involved in the night before. He told him that he thinks he killed a sheriff deputy and may have killed two sheriff deputies, but he definitely killed one of them. And they went to his house and they found bloody clothes. They found weapons and ammunition, and they didn't do anything about it. They sent him to jail. And he said this was on the morning of March 17th, the morning after the shootout that I described on the evening of March 16th. This was 3 days before Imam Jamil was apprehended in Whitehall, Alabama, which took place on the 20th of March of that same year. But 3 days before he was taken into custody, someone fitting the description, because I didn't mention that the sheriff deputy Algernon English, he gave a description of the shooter, the assailant, which doesn't fit Imam Jamil at all. It fits perfectly this other individual, James Santos, that I mentioned. And James Santos was shot that night, and he fits the description, but he was not taken into custody. As a matter of fact, he was interviewed by our defense you know, by someone working on behalf of defense of Imam Jamil, but the state never interviewed him. All the state did was hide him in prison. But fortunately, he was interviewed about 2 months ago by the newly formed Conviction Integrity Unit. So I
Now,
forgot when I
oh,
was. You asked me to clarify, but I hope I've
yeah.
clarified what was going on. Why why there was a warrant against Imam Jamil, and who those sheriff deputies were, and what happened to those sheriff deputies when they came. They got involved in a shooting incident, not with Imam Jamil, but with James Santos.
I want to. I
A
think, yeah, I think it's important to point out too, when you said like the descriptions, right? Now, I believe they, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they said that uh they testified. I believe Algernon English that the shooter was 5'7" or 5'8" or something like nature.
Yeah, he said he was 5'8", and he said that he had and he
Got
said that
shot. Right.
Ray, matter of
Right.
fact, said that he said that his mother always told him to look a man in the eyes, and he would never forget those cold gray eyes. Imam Jamil has eyes that's the same color as my eyes,
How
and
tall is it?
he's taller than me. I'm 6'3". Imam Jamil is a few inches taller than me. So how and he's your complexion. Uh, he's your complexion. So he's is how can you confuse somebody 5'7", my complexion, with a person that's 6'5", your complexion? But this is the description
And
Algernon
and I'm
English.
sorry, just to add one more thing, just to clarify, both of these cops were black,
Yeah,
making it less likely that they would have a hard time misidentifying other black men.
yeah. Unfortunately,
Exactly.
one of these cops was never questioned because he lost his life in the initial
Right.
shooting.
Right.
But the other person has the other person is the one that gave this description and gave this long explanation of why he'd never forget, because this is something his mother always taught him, to look a man dead in the eyes. And he claimed he looked a man dead in the eyes. Imam Jamil wore glasses most of the time, and he wore tinted yellow glasses. So, in the middle of the night, how you look a man in the eye with tinted gray yellow glasses, and whatever you saw and what you described you saw, it could not have been Imam Jamil. If that's what you saw, then that could not have been Imam Jamil.
Not only that, it's dark,
Yeah,
and you see somebody gray eyes. I mean, his eyes must have been shining in the dark like Cujo or something. I mean, that's like real confusing,
yeah,
But yeah, but it also gets crazier. I want you to, if you don't mind, you know, in the courtroom, I know that there was a situation with a bullet that they said that traveled on Imam Jamil's car all the way to Whitehall and didn't roll off. But in the courtroom, someone breathed on it, blew on it, and it was able
yeah.
to roll off the table. Can you touch that?
They claimed there was a yeah, the state claimed that there was a there was a bullet fragment from the bullet they claimed, from the gun that they claimed Imam Jamil was shooting from, and they said, and it laid on the just above the windshield wipers, and that it was still in that position after driving from Atlanta, Georgia to Alabama, to Whitehall, Alabama. They
So
claimed
what's the distance for folks
this,
to know
this
that?
bullet shell casing was still sitting on the. They said that it hadn't moved for the whole trip. So then
And how long is that trip again?
that trip is about 2.5, about 3 hour trip. Yeah.
Oh,
Maybe,
70
really?
miles an hour.
yeah.
But surely then they went and they did ballistics tests and gunpowder residue. What is it that on the hand? And they found the weapon that was the murder weapon in Imam Jamil's on his bed or whatever. I mean, surely they had all this other evidence to go with.
The thing is, they had none of this other evidence. They didn't have. Imam Jamil was made to wash his hands when the FBI got there. They immediately washed his hands. They didn't take a paraffin test, which would have showed if he had had residue.
Yeah, why would they make him wash his hands?
Yeah,
wow.
They made him. The first thing they did was wash his hands so that they could erase any possibility of his hand if a paraffin test was taken, that it wouldn't have showed anything. But so they didn't take a paraffin test, and then they washed his hands just to prove it. That's why I say if you study many of the cases of our soldiers, you'll find that the state will implicate itself. If you study the actions of the state, we don't need to bring forth any witnesses to characterize the state as we did in October 21st in the spirit of Mandela International Tribunal, where we brought witness after witness. But if you study any one of the cases of this that the state has had against our soldiers, you will find that the state implicates itself. All its wrongdoing is right in the evidence without us calling any witnesses whatsoever. The state itself is the witness against itself. So this is what they did in that case. Plus the weapons that they found. It was the weapons that they found. They found it in the woods, and the weapons were wrapped up. They were in plastic cases. They were wrapped in plastic. They were wrapped in paper, then wrapped in plastic, and they were found they were always the search party, which included deputies from Lowndes County and federal marshals and FBI agents. There was a rogue FBI agent by the name of Ron Campbell, who the search party says he found all the weapons. Ron Campbell, who was not assigned to the case, but was there anyway. Understand? The FBI said that Ron Campbell was not assigned to the case of H. Rap Brown, of Imam Jamil, but he was on the scene, and they said that all of the weapons that was found at his call. Oh, look what I see over here. He would go, and by the time they would get there, he would have a weapon in his hand.
But then surely they found fingerprints from Imam Jamil on all of the guns and all of the plastic and the wrapping.
Imam Jamil's fingerprints were not found. So there was
I'm
clear lack of evidence of that Imam Jamil was guilty or had anything to do with this crime. And then we also have the issue of the feds wanting to bring a case but were blocked when they found out that they were being watched by the people. They couldn't. Their case was going to be rebutted by the witnesses that we did have, because the people in Whitehall, Alabama, was watching them, because they're wondering what's going on when they see these guys running through the woods shooting at each other.
Hmm.
So all of this is all of this, you know, like I say, the state's actions incriminates themselves. Yeah.
Is this the same FBI agent that kicked Imam Jamil in the face while he was on the ground? This
Right.
Ron Campbell guy?
Yeah, when the FBI got on the scene, this is the night of March 20th. When the FBI got on the scene, the sheriff deputies had already apprehended Imam Jamil. He surrendered. He surrendered to the sheriff's department, and they had they had handcuffed him. They had handcuffed him and laid him on the ground. And when the FBI got there, this particular rogue agent, Ron Campbell, saw that Imam Jamil was already in custody, and so he kicked on him, stomped on him, and spit on him. Had to be restrained by Lowndes County sheriff deputies. The feds had to be restrained by the Lowndes County sheriff deputies, because they were planning to kill Imam Jamil that night. So they were mad that they didn't get the opportunity to kill him, and when they tried to carry it out, they were restrained by Lowndes County sheriff deputies. So to keep that from being, so they played that down to keep that from being a point in the trial.
So we have about, unfortunately, we got about 15 minutes, and we're gonna definitely have to bring you back on because we got tons of things to talk about. But I want to, just putting the fast forward on it. Imam Jamil is sentenced to life plus 25. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's sentenced to life without possibility of parole, plus 35 years.
Now, while he's here, before, because again, he was a state prisoner, right?
Right, he's
So,
state prisoner. Yeah,
right.
he was sentenced to that. He was sentenced to that in state time. He went to Reedsville prison in southern Georgia, and while there, the inmates, the Muslim inmates in Reedsville prison and several other prisons in the area put together a petition that they wanted Imam Jamil to be their representative, to be their imam, and be their representative between them and the state. So they have a contract with the federal government that any prisoner who is too high profile to handle, and that was an issue that was too high profile for them to handle. This person is, and plus another thing, we used to have demonstrations in front of the courthouse and in front of the prison, in front of Reedsville prison. We'd have national demonstrations. People would come from across the country to be part of the demonstrations with us in front of the courthouse in Reedsville and in front of the prison in Reedsville where Imam Jamil was being held, and the prisoners themselves demanding that he be, or just requesting that he be the imam for all of them and be their representative on behalf of all of them. They decided to turn the case over to the federal government. So that's why he is now in federal custody, even though he's not charged with any state. He's not charged with any federal offenses. He's still charged with the same thing, but he's in federal custody because of the nature of his leadership ability. Even employees of Alabama, sheriff deputies who were in charge of his custody, was saying that they wanted him to be the imam so that they could go. They was looking forward to hearing him give the sermons, give the khutbahs on Friday.
These are the sheriffs in Atlanta, in Alabama.
Sheriffs, people on the sheriff's department in Montgomery County, Alabama.
And there's a story. There's a story as well. Not to cut you off, but there's a story in regards to an Aryan that was sent to be a cellmate with Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Can you talk about that story in regards to how things turned out?
Yeah, that's one of the things that happens when we're locked up. Often we're in segregation, and we suddenly find ourselves surrounded by enemies. So in this case, it was Imam Jamil was in segregation, and he was confronted by a member of the Aryan Nation. And after, don't know how long a talk it was, but the result of the talk was that this member of the Aryan Nation became Muslim. He made his shahada, took his declaration of faith, and became Muslim, and went back and carried that to members of the Aryan Nation. And some of them, at least 3 others in the Aryan Nation, on hearing Jelly Roll was his name. When they hear Jelly Rolls talk about how he, his conversation with Imam Jamil, they made their declaration of faith, took their shahada.
Man, listen, you know you're a bad dude when you get a white boy named Jelly Roll.
And 3 of his partners.
Yeah, that became Abdullah.
Right.
Abdullah. That's
yeah.
I mean, that's a scene I want to see play out one day. I want to see what would that have looked like.
That alone. And
that
he
first
was
conversation with Jelly Roll headed back to the South.
Right. That was they must not Jelly Roll lost his damn mind. Did you get him? A lie they had a lot. What? It was that Jelly Roll flipped his wig.
Yeah, that's part of what I wanted to do, if we have time, is just quickly mention some of the things that IJAN, the Imam Jamil Action, has been doing. IJAN is the advocacy arm of the campaign to free and exonerate Imam Jamil, formerly known as H. Rap Brown. And so we've been ongoingly involved in certain activities because our orders from Imam Jamil, he never says, man, get me out of here. I need to get out of here. He always says, use my name and use my case to raise the level of struggle. To use my case to push the struggle on, keep my name being mentioned, and use it in ways that'll forward our struggle for liberation, our struggle for community self-determination. So one of the things that we did is that we established the Freedom Fighters Film Festival, where we focus on 4 particular freedom fighters that I mentioned before. And you can give me her name again, because I'm having the same type of junior.
Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker.
Yeah. Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, El-Haj Malik Shabazz, and Imam Jamil, H. Rap Brown himself, as 4 freedom fighters that we focus on in this Freedom Fighters Film Festival. and we'll be engaging it. And we had it during Kwanzaa of 2022, and we'll be engaging in it this coming August. We'll do another run of the Freedom Fighters Film Festival. We had over 11 organizations participate in about 6 different cities across the South. And then we got involved in developing the Exposed COINTELPRO campaign. Your listening audience may be aware that Congressman Bobby Rush, former Black Panther Party member, Congressman Bobby Rush, initiated a bill called the COINTELPRO Full Disclosure 2998, which now I believe the person's name, I believe, is Cory Booker, has agreed to continue the fight because Bobby Rush is not going to run again. So the bill would essentially die with when he leaves Congress. But it's already been picked up, and we've already engaged with the congressman who's going to carry it further, and we've already had meetings, and so this coalition that we're asking people to join is called the COINTELPRO Full Disclosure 2998 Coalition, and you can get information on it. It says like you can get information on everything I spoke about if you go to our website, which is www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org, www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org, and that will give you the information on the COINTELPRO Full Disclosure campaign. Right now, we're concentrating on having webinars as well as doing exposés on people who have been harmed, who were harmed by the COINTELPRO program, by the actions of the U.S. government officials under the official program called COINTELPRO, which is a program that the International Tribunal described as genocide. We also have we also developed a coalition known as the Black Belt Coalition against the Black Belt Coalition on Human Rights. That coalition was established. We had a working group of people that we were responding here in the South. We were responding to the UN's declared decade for people of African descent. So we developed a group of people, a working group, and we were involved in creating recommendations that could be sent to the UN around areas of civic engagement, voting rights, health, public health, environmental justice, as well as state killing, police killings, and the holding of political prisoners. This was like 5 different counts that were part of the Spirit of Mandela International Tribunal. These 5 specific counts are areas that that this working group had developed recommendations. Those recommendations were presented to the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. And it's interesting that usually when there's a time period, like usually a decade for a specific cause, when that decade is finished, sometime after that decade is finished, they will create a permanent forum on that, just as they did on the International Decade of Children and on International Decade of Women, etc. But this time, before the decade was finished, the decade hasn't finished yet. They've already created a UN Permanent Forum because we've already created a forum to bring recommendations to the United Nations, as well as other international bodies that explain explain what is being done, what's actually taking place in the United States that's directly to thwart the freedom struggle of Africans here in North America.
We
So
definitely
things that we're working on, that we're involved in, and as I said, you can get more information about all of that when you go to the website, www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org.
yes, we have it scrolling right under the right on the ticker at the bottom. So make sure that you check it out. It's right, look right at the ticker, www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org. Baba Bilal Sunni-Ali, we've had you on a couple times before. We definitely appreciate you coming in, dropping jewels. Tonight, we have at 7 p.m. we'll be having the debut of 3 of your daughters on Black Power Media. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Daughters of the Whirlwind. We broadcasting here. It's a Sunni-Ali day today. What what are you expecting from the show? You got and shout out to my brother Shakur, Comrade Shakur, Commander Shakur, your son, who is one of the founder members of FTP movement as well. You know, shout out to him. But what do you think we can expect from this new show, Daughters of the Whirlwind? I'm gonna ask you. You know better than us.
Well, I can't tell you all that you would expect. I know that I came in Georgia, staying in Georgia. One time I came over my son Chaka's house, and I was tired, but I couldn't go to bed because I'm listening to this chatter in the dining room, and they're talking about all the different things that happened to them that they never told me about, you know. And I'm saying, wow, you know, I didn't know that. I said, you guys ought to, at the time with the Exposed COINTELPRO campaign, I said, you guys need to do a webinar, because we've been doing webinars with people who've been affected, but we've never talked about our children being affected. And I think it would be a good turnout. They were already involved in, my daughter had already did a film. That's my daughter Asantewa, Dr. Asantewa Fulani Sunni-Ali.
That's
She
right.
did a film called Growing Up New African. That's going to be premiered at the New African Nation Day in Charleston, South Carolina, Friday, March 31st. They had developed this, so they took that same title, so to speak, and called it Growing Up Targeted. So our first webinar of Growing Up Targeted featured these same 3 daughters of mine. Not all of my daughters, but just 3 of my daughters who have come together, who live in this area in Georgia, and they're working together to continue the struggle. I'm really happy about it, because one of the goals, as stated goals of the counterintelligence program, was to make sure that the revolutionary ideology, the revolutionary nationalist ideology, which we were spreading and teaching, would not spill over to the next generation. So it's spilt over. It's spilt over not only to the next generation, when we see organizations such as the Malcolm X grassroots movement going on, but these 3 daughters in particular, are not just, they're not just sisters out there trying to get along, trying to cope, trying to cope with racism, trying to cope with the discriminatory practices of the United States corporation. They're fighting back. They understand they're under attack, and they're fighting back, and they're fighting back hard. And I'm very proud of them. You know, so I'm anxious to see what they'll be uncovering, just as you are anxious to see. And I encourage people to please watch them, because I'm on in the morning. They're on at night. It's the perfect thing. They're following my footsteps, and with footsteps, like you mentioned, my son was a founding member of the organization that you're still that both of you are still leading in, FTP. There would not be an FTP had COINTELPRO succeeded.
Right.
It would not be an FTP. If COINTELPRO had succeeded, there would not be a Daughters of the Whirlwind podcast for you to watch tonight. So COINTELPRO failed, and that's one of the reasons that we have the Exposed COINTELPRO campaign, is so we can explain COINTELPRO, what it tried to do, and demonstrate how it failed. It has actually failed. We have reached the next generation and the next generation. I have great grandchildren, and my great grandchildren are revolutionaries. They're just as much revolutionaries as I was when I was their age, sitting with my uncle, who had just come back from Africa. He was part of the UNIA ACL. So they didn't disrupt that generation from my uncle and my grandfather's generation coming to me, and they haven't disrupted my generation moving forward. COINTELPRO as a program has failed, and we need to exaggerate its failure and show the victories, and our people are attracted to victories. So that's why it's important that we show the victories and explain the victories to people, so more people can be attracted, more people can join this struggle for liberation.
We appreciate you, Bob
Absolutely.
Bilal.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
You lit it up. Yes.
Thank you. Because without this, what would I be doing on a Sunday night?
See, look at that. It's Monday morning. We don't know what you be doing Sunday night. See how that works?
Yeah.
See, we all back in time. You've been checking out Guerrilla Intellectual University. That was Bilal Sunni-Ali. Again, we will definitely have him back on the show. I did an interview with him, one of the earlier RSTV pieces, where we talked about Gil Scott-Heron. Of course, we're looking forward to bringing you back on to talk about the musical side as well, because art is definitely absolutely a weapon, and it helps to get us through our people's liberation movement. So we appreciate you coming on, Bob Bilal, and we'll see you again soon. And it's war without terms, right?
Right on.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you both.
No doubt. You're checking out Guerrilla Intellectual University. Dr. Jared Ball, what you think, man?
Man, that was fire. That's what I think.
Okay.
So shout out to you, and many thanks to Baba Bilal, and power to Imam Jamil, and shout out to the remixers who check this out live, and to those who see it later on. Shout out to you as well, and let's keep it going, man. This was great. Very
win.
I can't think of a better way to start a Monday morning. You know what I'm saying?
Without a doubt. And I want to say to you all real quick, share this, because again, today marks 23 years of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, since he was kidnapped, and he's been languishing in these American gulags. Shout out to his family. I did get the opportunity to work with his brother Ed Brown. May he rise in power. He was definitely a true brother, fighting on behalf of his brother. And as Baba Bilal talked about, he was the reason that Imam Jamil got into this movement. So, we remember him and his sons, and his wife, and we appreciate his work, his efforts, and his energy. And I say that, it is when we talk about standing on the shoulders of our people, these are folks whose shoulders we should be standing on, but not to break them. You know what I'm saying? But to strengthen them, uplift them, and to keep that call free them all. Dr. Ball, thank you for your contributions to this jam.
Hey, it's an honor and a pleasure.
No
And
doubt,
it
no doubt.
rhymes, Dr. Ball rhymes with free them all. You know what I'm saying? So
I mean, look at that. I knew you was gonna throw something up in there. Chief Petty Officer, Dr. Ball in the building.
there
I
we
am
go.
Kalonji Changa. Dr. Janine Jones, Dr. Joy James, shout out to them. They'll be back soon. But for now, stay dangerous, and it's war without terms. Guerrilla Intellectual University. We out of here. Peace.
Peace.